you've seen it, and we'll do the same with the bird. So with frogs, they have a very short trunk. Okay, that's kind of a characteristic thing of frogs. And there's some serious muscles that are involved in extension of the trunk that basically helps when they leap. And so they have this, these may show up better on this frog. Not necessarily. There's a boundary that's a little hard to see here, but there's a muscle that runs along here. It's coming down laterally. Okay. And this is the lumbaris. Okay. And then there's one more medial here, and that's the longissimus dorsi. Okay. And then there's another muscle here that runs from the inside of the ilium to the end of the urostyle. This one here, and that's the coccygio iliacus. So those are those three main muscles. There, in the leg itself, there's this muscle on the back of the calf. That one probably a lot of people know, just kind of from general knowledge. What is that?
Gastrocnemius.
That's the gastrocnemius. Okay, what does that do at the ankle joint?
Flexes, extends it.
Well, this is what, dorsal or ventral surface?
Ventral.
Ventral. This is ventral, so technically that would be flexing the ankle joint, even though, yes, it's straightening it out. Okay. So gastrocnemius there. On the front of the thigh here, there's a muscle that corresponds to our quadriceps, but in a frog it only has three parts, so it's called a triceps femoris, the three-headed muscle of the thigh, and that's all of this. And one part of that in particular that stands out more prominently is this thing here, and that's the rectus anticus femoris, which is the same thing as the rectus femoris in mammals. Okay. And what is that muscle doing functionally? What's its action going to be? Is it going to retract or protract the thigh at the hip joint? Protract at the hip joint, and at the knee, since it's crossing the knee down to the shank, is it going to extend or flex the knee?
Extend.
Extend, exactly. Okay. And the same thing happens with our quadriceps. Okay. And what else? Oh, big muscle on the back side here is this one there. That is the semimembranosus. And this is, again, corresponds to a muscle of the same name in mammals, part of the hamstrings group. And this is going to do what at the hip joint? Is it going to protract or retract, do you think? Retract. Retract the thigh at the hip, and at the knee, is it going to flex or extend? Flex. Okay, so basically, the hamstring group is the exact antagonist to the quadriceps group in terms of actions. Quadriceps protracts at the hip and extends the knee. Hamstrings retracts at the hip and flexes the knee. Okay. And that's going to be the same in mammals. So I pointed out, just looking ahead. What else have we? Oh, the only other two muscles on here to mention are this little guy here. Any ideas? That is the gluteus. Yep. So that's kind of the butt muscle, and that's basically an abductor and protractor of the thigh. And then over on this side, I guess that'll do. It's a little chopped up, but there's a muscle in here, this muscle, and that would be
Gracilis major.
The gracilis major, yes. Okay, and that's an adductor of the thigh. And the muscles here, I tried to just pick out, not all the muscles, but enough so that for any movement, there was one muscle that would cause it and one that would be the antagonist. So you can kind of go through, and there's in the lab manual, it kind of walks you through some of, it's funny to say walks you through, leads you through the some of the movements of the frog and how that works. Okay, good, frog, happy, okay. Then bird, also real quick, very simple, two muscles. What's this?
Pectoralis major.
That's pectoralis, or pectoralis major to be precise, and that's the main wing depressor, or what's the other name for that movement at the shoulder joint?
Depression?
Depression, or for bringing it towards the midline of the body?
Adduction.
Adduction. Okay, so it's a depressor or adductor of the wing. It's inserting onto the humerus coming off the keel of the sternum. If we peel that back, you'll see there's another muscle deep to it there, and that would be
Supracoracoideus.
the supracoracoideus, exactly. And that's the one that has a tendon that wraps around to the dorsal side, so I can follow its tendon up. See where the probe comes, or the forceps come through there? And I can reach around there and find that tendon. See right in here, coming up through that hole, the foramen triosium, and attaching to the top of the humerus right there. Okay, and that's the main wing elevator, or abductor. Okay. Now, you've probably had this experience where you eat chicken breasts. You're eating through the breast, and then like this piece falls away, and there's that nice little inner tender piece. That's the supracoracoideus. Okay. Lovely, huh? Okay, so that's our other critters. So let's then turn to Necturus. And 10 minutes, maybe? Okay. So for Necturus, I think you guys all probably did okay with myomeres and myosepta. This is the horizontal septum, so there's epaxial and hypaxial musculature. Okay, it's just like in the shark. The epaxial muscles in the Necturus are all, the main part of it that we see is called what? Okay, so I did this. I'm just looking to see one that's actually dissected. This big main mass of muscles, the dorsalis trunci. Okay, so the dorsal muscle of the trunk. And then the only other one that you were supposed to look for on these guys, I just found it. No, it doesn't work. There we go.
There's like a quarter-inch flap, but that's about it.
Yeah, there's a little guy here that runs little short segments between successive vertebrae, and that's the interspinalis muscle. Okay. And that's something that Walker had you look for. It's not as beautiful as you might want it to be, but it is there. And that typically what we'll see in more terrestrial animals is much greater differentiation of this axial musculature associated with terrestrial locomotion. In the hypaxial muscles, I guess we're going to look at this guy. Basically, we get a differentiation of 3 layers. The outermost layer is what's called the
External.
oblique, the external oblique, and it has fibers that run ventrally and caudally, like this. Then there's a layer that's deep to it. That's, we can see a little bit over right here. Do you see that? And that has fibers that run ventrally and cranially, and that would be internal oblique. And then finally, deep to that, there's a muscle layer that has fibers that run more or less across or transversely, and that would be the transversus. And Walker mentions that in these guys, the external oblique towards the midline has fibers that run more or less longitudinally and is forming an incipient, he calls it, rectus abdominis, which is the straight muscle, the six-pack muscle that runs down the middle of the abdomen.
Incipient.
Mammals and actually frogs.
What is incipient?
Incipient means going to turn into something. It's not there yet, but it's going to happen, which is kind of a weird way to look at it, because it's really not going to happen for this Necturus, certainly. But what he means is that in a metamorphosed salamander, you'll see it more developed. These guys, as a larval salamander, it's very poorly developed. Okay. Hypobranchial muscles. Remember, the hypobranchial muscles are the ones that are under the branchial region. We divide them in tetrapods very usually into prehyoid and posthyoid. So the first question you always want to ask yourself is, where's the hyoid? There's the hyoid right there. There's a bone. I can feel it. Okay. And so prehyoid is in front of that, and there's a pair of muscles, one of which has been removed on this guy, but a pair running down the midline here from the chin back to the hyoid, and those are the geniohyoids. And the genion is the chin, inside of the chin. So geniohyoids. If you peel through your geniohyoid and look deep to it, you can see some very weakly developed fibers right there that are very unimpressive. And that is the genioglossus, okay, which is in animals that have really well-developed tongues, major fibers running up into the tongue. Okay. And then the posthyoid muscles behind the hyoid are just these two big masses here, which are anyone? Rectus cervicis. Rectus just means straight. Cervicis means what? What are we talking about? Cervical region, the neck region. So it means literally the straight muscle of the neck. Okay. Thanks. Don't steal my sheet. I need that. Okay. So then that gets us onto appendicular muscles. And this is probably where the most work was on these guys, is trying to find all these appendicular muscles. Ventrally, there's a big fan-shaped muscle right here that runs out from the hypaxial muscles out towards the limb. And that would be, that's the pectoralis, okay? And then there's a littler muscle that you can see in front of pectoralis right here that's coming from the coracoid cartilage. See the coracoid cartilage there? And this little muscle lying on top of it. There's the coracoid cartilage and this muscle. And that muscle would be the supracoracoideus. This is sort of out of sense. And where did we just see a supracoracoideus?
Pigeon.
Pigeon. Yeah, so there's those same two muscles that we just saw in the bird in a salamander, and they are homologous. They don't just happen to have the same names.
They're not homologous?
They are.
Oh,
Yes. Please don't make them not homologous. Okay, the coracoradialis we'll come back to in a moment. Humeroantebrachialis. Some of these muscles in Nectaurus, you gotta love the names. Humeroantebrachialis. What's the antebrachium?
Forearm.
Forearm. So it's running from the humerus to the forearm. It's humeroantebrachialis. Okay, and if we look at the muscles of the forearm here, you basically see two muscles that can be seen ventrally, okay, here and here, okay? And this is the humeroantebrachialis. This one that's more anterior. This that's more posterior and a little bit deeper is the coracobrachialis. Okay.
Coraco and antebrachialis.
Humeroantebrachialis and coracobrachialis. Okay. And then down here are the forearm flexors. These are the muscles that live in the forearm but flex the wrist and digits. Okay. If we look between, let's see this here, in between the humeroantebrachialis and the coracobrachialis, you can see another little muscle lying in there, and that is the coracoradialis. And it's got a tendon that runs all the way down to the radius. And I'm not going to try to show you because it's kind of tiny and deep. Okay, and those are all the ventral limb muscles. Okay. Dorsal limb muscles then, flip him over. This guy is going to be beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Okay. So there's this big, kind of broad triangular muscle right here. Get a probe under it. Maybe I won't get a probe under it. This guy right here. See that? Okay. What is that? Anyone?
Latissimus dorsi.
The latissimus dorsi. Yes. Okay. Coming off the trunk musculature, running down to the humerus. Okay. There's another muscle that seems like it shouldn't be dorsal, it should be ventral, but it's this muscle down here that's coming from the procoracoid process to the humerus. That's called the procoracohumeralis. Okay. And we know it's dorsal based on the nerve supply, the innervation, even though it's located ventrally. The subcoricoscapularis, I'm not going to look for because it's way too deep, but it's down on the underside of the coracoid and scapula, the deep inner surface. The triceps, though, we can certainly see. The triceps is this muscle located on the caudal border of the arm there, and that's the main extensor of the elbow joint. And then finally we get to our forearm extensors, here dorsally on the forearm, and this muscle here coming off the scapula and running out of the humerus, this guy right here, and that would be Eric left. I was going to count on him since he had immunity. That's the scapular deltoid. So it's the muscle that elevates the arm there. Okay. What else? That's really it for the actual true limb muscles. Pelvic muscles we're not doing, but it's just, I didn't find it too useful, mostly because the names don't translate very well to anything we'll ever see again. There's homologies, but the names don't really help you see those. So we just really pay attention to dorsal and ventral here. And then for the branchiomeric muscles, mandibular arch muscles include intermandibularis, which looks a lot like it did in a shark. Okay. There's the jaw adductors, and those are divided into two in the necturus, levator mandibuli anterior and levator mandibuli externus. For the hyoid muscles, likewise, there's an interhyoideus that extends across the throat. And this is actually very nice, Trevor. Thank you. From one side to the other. And then there's a very, and that's right in here. And then there's a very thin layer back here that's called the sphincter coli. That's also part of the hyoid muscle that runs across the throat. Okay. If we peel those back and look deep to them, you can see this large muscle that runs down here. And that one is the branchiohyoideus. Okay. That's the branchiohyoideus running down from the branchial arches to the hyoid. And I didn't actually look to see. Had you found your depressor mandibuli? Let's see if we can see it now. Yeah, you can see it right here. Right in the sort of front of the branchiohyoideus, between it and the adductor mandibuli or levator mandibuli, is the depressor mandibuli, which is a hyoid arch muscle that actually attaches to the back of the lower jaw. I don't think it's the lower jaw. Okay. And then for the branchiomeric muscles, we only did two. There's a series of little guys that you can see running down towards the region of the external gills, all in here. And those are the levatorus arcuum. And there's a muscle that comes down towards the limb right here. And this is the cucullaris muscle that we saw already in the shark and is attaching onto the scapula.
And it is also homologous.
It's homologous, yeah. And it's homologous with the trapezius in us. Okay, sorry for the quick review, but